Hey guys, I am Game Advisor, and today we're going to be going over a full electricity and plumbing guide for you, where we'll break down what's the most useful aspects of electricity, how to actually use electricity, and some tips and tricks to help you get better at using plumbing and electricity. So let's just jump right into it. Now, first and foremost, let's go ahead and look at the blueprints tree, because this is where we're going to figure out exactly what we even have available to us within these categories. Now, when it comes to electricity, the first thing you're going to unlock is the biofuel generator. You'll need to be able to craft this in order to craft pretty much anything else that's electrical, so we're going to make sure we get that along with our electricity tool, which is also mandatory if we want to be able to hook anything to electricity that requires electricity. Now, if we move further down, we can see there's a lot of different electric items like the furnace, the material processor, we've got all the different electric benches down here at the end, like the electric composter, masonry bench, a heavy heater, all that good stuff. But today, we're not going to really talk so much about what each of these do and which ones are good or bad, because at the end of the day, a lot of these really aren't that useful to most players. So we're going to focus more so on talking about what we actually want to do when we're playing in a mission in order to get to using electricity as fast as possible. And in this case, we're going to want to focus on the biofuel generator, since it's basically required to build any of the other forms of electricity outside of the water wheel. Now, as far as cost goes, your biofuel generator and your water wheel are about the same price, and neither one requires you to have anything other than a furnace that can craft steel. So this means that we don't actually need to go out of our way to craft things like composites like we would for a solar panel and things like that, or craft an electric furnace to make those composites for the solar panel. And instead we can just make a water wheel and we can make a biofuel generator. Now, some missions will require you to have the full biofuel generator because it provides 5,000 power or there's just no water source nearby. However, there are a lot of ways to solve that, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But generally speaking, it's entirely up to you which one you want to make. Just if you make the water wheel, you might have to make multiple of them, and you might have to run some cords along a much longer distance. So it really just depends on what your use for it is. Personally, whenever I can, I like to go with the water wheel because it's a little bit cheaper and easier to make, but that's just my personal opinion and everybody else is going to differ. Now, let's break down exactly why we don't want that solar panel. And this basically is just the fact that it requires composites and a lot of electronics, as well as it only working during the day. Yes, the biofuel generator does require a constant source of fuel, but one can last a very long time, more than enough for a full mission's worth of doing things. And a water wheel lasts infinitely, but also does pick up trash and can pick up some useful trash such as fish and things like that you can use to cook yourself some food. Now, again, those composites are only able to be crafted within an electric furnace. And because of that, we also need to have a material processor in order to make the composites, to then put them into the electric furnace, to then be able to make the solar panel. It also requires triple the electronics of a water wheel, or about triple the electronics of a biofuel generator for the same amount of power you'll get out of one. It also does not work at night, which can be rather annoying. So again, the moral of the story here is solar panels are only really useful if you're playing on like an open world mode and you just don't want to have to deal with it whatsoever. So again, they're useful in closed loop systems in the open world mode, which I'm going to show you here in just a little bit, but just know that generally speaking, we're going to avoid these. Now, we do also have the water pump and the water pipe tool. These are required to do any form of plumbing. You do not need the sprinkler, so you can pretty much ignore that, as it's almost never going to be used unless you're living in a wooden base. And they do require composites, which is more of a reason to not craft them, because if you can craft composites, you might as well just make a stone base. You easily have the resources to do it at that point. Now, as far as why we care about water, it's for a number of different reasons, but primarily it's to make benches go faster and to help with your hydroponic crop plots if that's something you're interested in doing for your open world mode. The nice thing about these hydroponic crop plots is just simply the fact that you don't have to pay attention to them. They'll keep themselves watered and you can move on with your life until they're done growing. However, they are very, very expensive, so unless you're planning to play extremely long term on a map, I would tell you just to stay away from them. And water-wise, the only things we really care about having is maybe getting the water to our cement mixers, just because the cement mixer will go faster if you have water inside of it. That's really the only major purpose, and one pump does provide us with enough water to have several cement mixers going at any given time. As you can see at the bottom right, it requires 1,000 power and provides 1,000 water. They're also pretty cheap to make. So if you want water pumping, it's there for you. But just know as we talk further in about how to use the electricity tool, that anything I talk about with that will pretty much also apply to the water pipe tool 99% of the time. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the ways you might want to actually use electricity and how to actually hook things up. Alrighty, so once you've got your actual electricity tool out, and as you can see down here in the bottom right corner, it's in my inventory, you're going to go ahead and select that, and then we're going to go ahead and start setting up some electricity. But first, we need to figure out what our power source is going to be. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and place a solar panel down right here, and that's going to provide me with electricity during the daytime while the sun is directly hitting it. Now, as you can see, it claims that it's not putting out electricity, and that's just because it's not hooked up to anything. It doesn't mean it's not working. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grab and just try to ignore some of all these other electricity lines going everywhere. I'll explain those here in a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and grab our electricity tool. We're going to left click onto the actual solar panel to make a connection to it. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to start dragging it where we want to go. Now, important thing to note here is that if you want to say run it to your second story, you can do so by just clicking it and then dragging it through the wall. It makes your life way easier, and you can see I've already done that with some cords here just to make it easier to get cords around my building. Personally, we're going to use this here on our second floor, so we're going to go ahead and select up here on my second floor. And now before I actually let go of it, so I'm not going to unselect the tool, I'm going to go ahead and run inside my house. I'm going to go ahead and go upstairs. And then once I am upstairs, you can see that electricity tool, because I haven't deselected it, is still going on. So now I want to power, say, this repair bench right here. What I'm going to do is go ahead and place this on the wall. And you'll see that this little pipe has kind of like a green electricity to it. So in other words, it's saying, hey, you're replacing me, but I'm not connected to anything. So if I want to connect it to something, I'm going to mouse over that, and it should turn yellow. That tells you that it is connecting to an object and that it's not going to place one of these little dimples on the wall, which I'll explain how those work here in just a second. So we're going to go ahead and connect that to here. And now we should have power flowing. As you can see, it says in the top left that there's not quite enough power for some reason. So if I wanted to say throw something in here, like let's put this in, and let's go ahead and repair, I don't know, this wooden hammer, it's not repairing, and that's because it's not getting enough power. Now, if your question is why isn't it getting enough power, we have that solar panel. We can go ahead and run out here. We're going to look at our solar panel, and we see that there's some kind of an issue going on. And this is actually why I don't like solar panels, because even though you move them sometime, they're very finicky about where they want to be placed in order to generate that power from them. So it's really, really hard to set them up properly, and they only work during certain times of the day. So for the purposes of the tutorial, we're going to go ahead and delink, and which I'm doing by just right-clicking on these power cords here from this solar panel. And what we're going to do is instead we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect this cable, which I'm going to actually leave all this cable down here. And we're going to go ahead and go upstairs back into our house. And we're going to connect that cable that we connected to the repair bench via the dimples, which gives me a great opportunity to explain these to you. So these are connection points. Anything connected to this specific dimple will be connected to the entire electrical grid. So if I had 10 different connections coming here, like let's say I did this, each one of these connection points all is getting power from this same grid. So all I need to do is take one of these. I'm going to run it along my roof in this case. And I'm going to go ahead, and normally I would hook it up directly into the generator, but because today I already have that hooked up, I'm going to just go ahead and link it to this dimple, and you'll see again it turns yellow to signify that it is connecting to something properly. So we'll go ahead and click that. Now you can see it's being provided with power from the system that these generators are all attached to, which is all this crazy cable network garbage that you see. But anyways, now we can go over to our repair bench, and we can actually go ahead and repair an item, which I don't actually have wood for, which is kind of funny. So let's just grab some out of this little box here, and then we can go ahead and repair our hammer. Congratulations, you've just learned how to hook up an item. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some unique situations and unique things that you can do with power in order to create a better environment for yourself. Now, first up, let me just explain that you can detach objects from your power grid without picking them up. A lot of people don't seem to realize that. All you need to do is equip your power tool, as I've just done, and then we can go ahead and right-click on the bench, and it will detach from the previous connection point. So this is no longer receiving power, as it is no longer attached to the grid, and I can just rehook it up. This is great if you don't have enough power in your base to power everything, so that you can only keep the things you want powered attached to the grid at any given time. So let's say I'm downstairs or I'm working on this textiles bench over here and it requires 2500 power. I could hook it up, do whatever I need in it, then unhook it and go back to having all that power still in the network, so I could reattach something like the repair bench and still be able to use it by just simply unattaching other benches. Now, the next thing I want to make sure that everybody understands is how far electrical grids can actually go. And the short answer to that is pretty much an infinite distance. And I'm just going to show you that right here. So here we are. We've got this electrical grid system I've already previously set up. And this is actually going to take us to a deep ore mining extractor that I've set up already for us, so we can see how far it actually can stretch out to. And as you can see, it is pretty darn far. We're just going to keep going this way. And again, we can pull out our electrical tool to see the little dimples so we can find our way there easily. And here we are at our electrical drill. And as you can see, it is powered. It is indeed mining, even though this cable connects all the way back to my base. Now, another good thing to keep in mind is the fact that whenever you want to, say, go ahead and drag a long cable like this, all we need to do is go ahead and select the ground, and then we're just going to go ahead and we're going to drag it along and rapidly tap left click in order to make sure that we don't have to go back. Yes, this can be annoying to do, but it is a lot better than doing what a lot of people do, where you stretch it out to maximum distance and then you try to click and it won't go. If that's happening, it's because you've tried to stretch the cord too long. And therefore, if you're trying to go a long distance, it's actually much easier to just kind of spam left click as you run. And even though the cable sections are a little bit smaller, it really doesn't actually hurt anything. And as you can see here, we've got a little wolf, so we'll pull out our weapon and kill it real fast and then continue about our day by picking up where we left off and just simply selecting the dimple. And if you're ever not sure if there's a connection properly, all you need to do is, let's say I want to connect this cable to this cable. I'm just going to go grab this dimple over here. But if I'm still uncertain for some reason if I've selected the right dimple, I'm just going to create a new one in the middle. I'm going to connect it and make sure I see that yellow, and then connect it and make sure I see that yellow. And now I am 100% sure these two lines of electricity are now connected together. It's just a quick little tip for you. It might help you out if you're wondering why something's not powered. It could just not be connected properly. So let's go ahead and head back to where we were, and I'll go ahead and explain some other things to you. Now, one other tip I have for you guys today is just the fact that some items can be turned on and off. As you see here, I have an omnidirectional work lamp, and if I don't want it to consume that 150 power from the grid, all I need to do is interact with it with F. It'll turn it off, and it is no longer consuming that 150 power. Very easy. Very simple, but only a few things in the game can actually do this, with most of them just being lights and things like that. Whereas things like our furnace really never turn off, and same with our material processor. These things just really aren't going to turn off most of the time. And even if you hook something else up, these might still be drawing power even though they're not on. And that's something important to remember, because you might have, say, one generator that provides 5,000 power, and then you might have yourself an electric furnace, and you might have yourself a material processor, but you also have yourself, say, something like an omnidirectional work lamp, and you're like, wait a second, why won't my lamp turn on? Well, that's probably because even though these aren't running necessarily, they are still consuming the power. So if you're ever wondering why you don't have enough power in your grid, yet you think you do because something's not running, it's just simply because if it's hooked up, it is probably drawing power from the grid. And the same thing goes with these omnidirectional lights. It's always safer to just go ahead and unplug them completely if you know you aren't going to be using them for a while, or if you're wondering why you don't have enough power from your grid, yet all your lights are off. Now, I did talk a little bit earlier about actually doing pumping, and This is going to work the exact same way we do with electricity. I don't really even need to show you much, but just so you know, whenever you're setting up pumping wires, it's going to have the same dimples as you can see right here. You can even see them with the electricity tool in your hand. You do not need the plumbing tool to do that. So you can actually go ahead and figure out where they're all going. You can see I have multiple pipes running all the way down here. And we're going to go ahead and see where these lead, which is down to our plumbing section. Now, as you can see, I actually already have these pumps pre-set up for us, so we don't have to do anything. And this pump isn't actually providing water, and that's just because it's not far enough in the water. And this one is actually bugged out too. To be honest with you, these pumps can be buggy sometimes, and there was a recent patch that actually broke them for a little while for us. So I can't show you at the moment, but basically what you need to know is I'll go ahead and show you. I'll pick this up. You're going to take your pump. If you ever want to lay it down, so let's grab it from our inventory. And we're going to make sure that it is submerged in water to some extent. So you'll know it's working because it'll turn green. If I have it here, it's not going to work at all. It won't even let me place it. But if I place it here, technically this qualifies as it being in water and you're good to go. So if I wanted to, I would just run my electricity wherever I need to run it. Like let's say over here to this connection, so now it has power, and then I would just go ahead and connect it to a pump line in order to bring a little bit of water from there into the pumping system. Not a very complex system, as it works exactly like electricity. Now, one more thing I wanted to quickly show you guys is why I love the water wheel so much. And the reason that is because if I interact with the water wheel right here, it's actually providing me with some spoiled plants. Now you may say, well, why do I want spoiled plants? And the short answer is you probably don't if it's a quick mission, but if you're playing long term and you set up say 20 of these suckers, you'll have tons of power to do just about everything you want, and it will provide you with spoiled plants so that you can keep fertilizer growing to keep your crops growing and so on and so forth. Now, it also can provide you with fish, and it only does it every so often, but what happens is if you hit all 50 items in this little water wheel here, it'll need to be cleaned out in order for it to continue providing power. To do that, all you need to do is drag it out and drop it. If you don't want the spoiled plants, you don't want the fish, that's it. It's just drag it out and drop it. Even if I had 20 of these, I only need to check them maybe every 4 or so in-game hours, maybe 2.5 at the very most. I'm not 100% sure on the exact time for it, but nonetheless, you do not have to check them often. You only need to come by and check it maybe every 1 game session, unless it's a really, really long play session, and sometimes not even that. Therefore, I love water wheels as they're cheap, and even though they only provide 2,000 power, I can mass produce them and they don't require biofuel for me to maintain. Just as a bonus tip for you guys, I actually don't recommend you make the electric composter, as you can just make 2 or 3 regular composters that don't require power and can still produce you biofuel. They're very small as well, so they won't take up a lot of space. Either way, if you want to make it, more power to you, but personally, I would recommend you just go ahead and you stick with the regular biofuel composter, which is, as you can see, significantly cheaper and required to purchase a biofuel can either way. Nonetheless, that's pretty much all there is to talk about when it comes to electricity and when it comes to water inside of Icarus at the time of recording this video. But if you guys have any questions, do feel free to ask in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. If you guys have any tips or tricks as well to help people out with their electricity and plumbing problems in Icarus, do make sure to comment down below. But otherwise, I want to give a big shout out to our Platinum and Above channel members, which include Jonathan S., Caustic FPV, and Jim Phillips. Thank you all so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more Icarus content. I'm Game Advisor, and I'll see you next time.